I was born in England, brought up in England, and I went to the University of Oxford and took my first scientific examinations there. And I did my doctorate in the University of Reading in England in organic chemistry. And then I went during the war as technical assistant to Imperial Chemical Industries in Billingham in North England. And after I'd finished that, I went back into the medical field in the University of London at Middlesex Hospital Medical School. And there I worked for 5 years in cancer research. And I was then invited to Switzerland and developed anti-tuberculosis drugs and anesthetics and anti-lepra drugs. And then I was called to the University of Geneva, where I taught chemotherapy and pharmacology to medical students for 9 years. And after I'd been in Geneva, I went up to Norway for 2 years to teach pharmacology to medical students. And then I went to America, to the University of Illinois for 5 years as professor of pharmacology. And then I went to Turkey for 2 years as professor of pharmacology there. And the years have run on now, and that'll be enough, I think.
You wrote, beside your scientific articles, some books about evolution, I think, which were very hard to get printed for you. How come?
Well, it's sometimes difficult to get work into print which doesn't agree with the establishment. The establishment is neo-Darwinian and materialistic, and I am neither neo-Darwinian nor am I a materialist, and so my views on evolution are not, shall I say, seen very kindly in the eyes of certain people in the establishment. But we did get them published, and they have pretty well flooded Europe and America now, so we won in the end.
You're against evolution. On what basic grounds?
On purely scientific grounds.
Such as?
There is no evidence whatsoever in any science that matter will organize itself. And the basis of evolution is that spontaneous generation took place, that matter, by chemical evolution, organized itself up to the state when it could live. You must have a certain state of complexity for a molecule or molecules to live. You need at least 800 macromolecules to live. There is no evidence that matter left to itself, even when fed with energy, will organize itself up to that state of complexity, or indeed any state of complexity. So that biogenesis, spontaneous biogenesis, could not take place. Now, Pasteur proved that over 100 years ago, that spontaneous generation did not take place. That is, the spontaneous self-organization of matter just does not occur. It's a scientific fact and supported by the second law of thermodynamics. The second reason is this, that once you've produced a simple cell, there is no evidence that the complexity of that cell will increase itself spontaneously to greater degrees of organization, say from amoeba up to man, because there is no biological coupling of metabolic energy which turns the metabolic energy of the cell into increased information. So the scientists are reduced to saying that the increased information which is on a higher cell as compared with a lower cell arrived by mutation, which is chance, which was then separated out by natural selection. There is for this no evidence whatsoever.
But all the beautiful fossils they find in the ground, which are millions and millions of years old, seem to give a certain increasing of complexity throughout many periods.
That's very nice, a wonderful argument. But you see, the argument is bound up on the fact that the theory is correct. You date your geological formations on the fossils which are in it. And you say, because the fossils are old, the formation is old, and the fossils are old because the theory is right. So you take the theory to prove the theory, which is circular reasoning. The ordinary dating of an ordinary piece of geological formation is done solely on the fossils in it. Well, if you say the fossils are old, then of course they must be old. You've said it, and that's all you proved. Nothing else.
But how come the Leakeys find such tremendous old skulls in Tanzania and Kenya and...
Well, now, I've followed Leakey's work very carefully for the last 10 years, and I admire Louis Leakey very much, who died recently. And his son, of course, is doing good work too. But because you find animals that are between the stages of development of us and the higher apes, that's no proof that they developed from ancestors of ours or vice versa. I mean, the fact is this, that species are all dying out today everywhere. Our job is to prevent the dying out of species. And I believe that the original creation contained far more species and stages than we now have. Now, some of those that Leakey found are obviously between us and the apes, if you like, but there's no proof that one species ever merged into another. Hinchelwood proved that years ago in Oxford. He was my professor of physical chemistry. He produced millions of stages of development of various bacteria in the hope of changing one bacteria into another. And he always came up against a species border which could never be crossed.
But I think there are good points for evolutionists. Take, for instance, the similarities between all living cells.
All living cells have the same genetic language, and in that respect they're all similar. But the similarity there is a similarity of conception. And a similarity of conception does not mean that they're genetically related, the cells. Now, I can prove that to you quite easily, perfectly simple. If I were a super genius, which God forbid I'm not, but if I were a super genius, I could go into your laboratory, say in 100 years' time, and I could put together your nucleotides, and I could put together all the parts of your genetic system, and produce exactly the same as is in you now. The 46 chromosomes which make you, I could make. Now, if I make you like that, and then I let you get incubated to a man, I see your twin brother, a side of yourself, who's exactly the same as you. Now, are the two of you related? The answer is no. Of course you're not genetically related. You're not his brother, nor are you his father. I've made you. But the similarity between the two of you is a similarity of conception which has nothing whatsoever to do with phylogeny, which means the tree of the genesis of life. Similarity between the ape and the man is a similarity of concept which has nothing to do with genetic relationship.
These are scientific laws and everyone knows them. Why do not many more scientists agree on the basis of these laws that evolution is impossible?
My dear sir, the colour of the picture you see depends upon the colour of the spectacles you wear. And if you wear materialistic spectacles, you will see everything in the light of materialism. I advise people to take their spectacles off and look at things as they are. The reason why people believe in materialism is because they see everything in the light of the materialism in which they believe, and so they're lost.
Why do people want to believe the evolution theory?
It's quite plain why. Huxley, the great evolutionist and the atheist, said why. He said how grateful he was to get out of the necessity of fearing some great creator behind the universe and to know there's nobody there who will ever call him to account. He said the relief of coming to that conclusion was simply inexpressible. It is a very great thing to remember that every idle word that we say and every bad deed that we do is going to be called up sometime into the universal think tank. And people like to be freed from that responsibility. They like to be able to do as they like.
Do you think that it's possible to combine the biblical account on creation by God with the evolution theory by saying the days were periods or something like it?
Well, now that's a very good question. Let me give you the answer of the evolutionists. Huxley said, I think it was Julian Huxley, if it wasn't Julian, it was Aldous, one of the two, said that one thing we are sure of, that you can't believe in the Bible if you believe in evolution. The reason is, of course, quite simple. The Bible says in the Old Testament as well as in the New that the world was made and biology was made by a logos, that is by word or by thesis or conception or idea. That is, there's an idea or teleonomy behind the world and behind biology. Now, Darwin, and the evolution theory, says that there is no word or logos behind biology, but that it's all chaos or randomness or chance. Now, if randomness made the world, then intelligence didn't, because intelligence leaves nothing to chance. The opposite of intelligence is chance, and the opposite of chance is intelligence. So evolution says that chance made it. If evolution is right and chance made it, then God didn't.
But could not have God used the method of evolution to make all things? Couldn't he have created the original matter with the possibility to develop itself from that starting point on?
Well, if that's the case, then all the information to build, say, the amino acids and the nucleotides of life, all the information was contained in the original amino acids and in the original carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen atoms. Now, the scientists know, we've examined the nucleus and the atoms long enough now, we know that the information required to build, say, the optical activity of a nucleic acid does not reside in the molecules which make up that nucleic acid. You can put the information in, but the information is exogenous and not endogenous. That is, the information to build you does not reside in the few elements of which you're made. That's the difficulty, and you can say it till the cows come home, that the information was there, and everybody knows that it isn't true, because the second law of thermodynamics denies just exactly that.
Can you prove God created the world?
Well, you can prove that information does not arise spontaneously. And information is an entity which you've got to take seriously. You can prove that if you have so many billions of atoms of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, and phosphorus in a test tube, you can show that they don't go in for any self-organization. Now, we have self-organization. And organization from self comes from the fact that information has been injected into those molecules. The whole question is, where did that information come from? The information that we know of always comes from what we call life. So I believe in a living God, a God who is alive, because only life can give information.
So you suppose could say that believing in a creating God is as scientific as believing in the model of evolution?
No, I wouldn't. I should say believing in the model of evolution flies in the face of all science. I wouldn't admit that point. I should say I'm not being dogmatic, I'm merely following the laws of science such as I've learned them and practiced them for over 40 years, that you cannot have a creation of something new from nothing. You see, we've descended into a scientific socialism. Socialism is very popular today because the socialists think they can offer something for nothing. And the scientists today think they can offer something for nothing. and you can't. You go bankrupt on it. And our science is going bankrupt on it today. You can see that. We're producing more and more scientific information without producing the morality in science which is capable of dealing with the information. And we're rapidly producing the state where we shall destroy ourselves because of this simple fact that science cannot produce what we need to govern the inventions we make.
Do you believe in what the Bible states in Genesis 1 about creation?
I do.
Why do you believe the Bible? Why not the creation myth of all kind of religions, Mohammedanism or Hinduism? Or?
Well, I've gone into those things very carefully. I've lived among the Muslims in my recent years, and I know the Quran, and I've gone fairly carefully into other religions, not as carefully as I'd like to, but as much as I had time for. And I find this, that the information which I get in the Bible fits far more closely the scientific information I have than any other religious explanation of the origin of life that I know. That's the reason. I can't believe anything which I know to be nonsense. I can only believe anything which is founded on fact. The same as I believe in the Christian religion, I believe in Christ because of the fact of the resurrection. If there was no resurrection, which is a fact of history, then there would be no Christian faith.
But doesn't that work the other way around? Isn't the belief first and the reasoning afterwards?
I think they both go together. I think they're dialectical. I don't think that you suddenly come to a perfect faith. I think that you take a first step in trusting a fact that you find out. And the fact that I found out was that Christ died for my sins. And having trusted that, then other facts turn up in which I can trust too. Faith is not a blind matter. There are certain matters in which I have to have faith because I can't see. But in the matters where I can see, then it needs to be reasonable, otherwise I can't believe it.
What influence did the evolution theory have on the general thinking of mankind?
Well, I think that the influence in the first place has been a bad one scientifically, because you see, it has assumed that spontaneous generation from inorganic matter to organic matter took place in the past with the same conditions of material and energy as we have today. And we know experimentally it doesn't take place today. So you have an unexperimental science in the first place. The second in this is, as a theory, it's like every other theory in philosophy. It isn't bad in itself as a means of thought, but if it reduces one's thought to nihilism, then it's bad. For example, if it puts a premium on my being brutal and getting through before the next man and killing my weaker neighbor, as has happened to make me a man, you see, through all the animal stages, then obviously the most brutal person is the most successful and the highest type of man. Instead of producing a superman of an intellectual type, you'll produce a superman of cunning and brutality. And I think that that effect has been perfectly well shown in its effect on the Nazis and its effect on the communists. Both have adopted the theory as their national theories, as the national theory, with the result that we all know it's a very bad thing for Nazi Germany and is a bad thing for the communists today. Now, obviously, it's getting through here in the West, and we're descending to the same sort of thing. You only got to see how people drive their cars today. They think it very clever to cut you off in a stream of traffic and get there first.
You should say that's the survival of the fittest.
In traffic.
In traffic.
Yes. I mean, it's only a minor matter, but still traffic is very important today. I think you've got to be very careful about the moral implications of any theory you take. And the moral implications of Darwinism is there's no morality. Because if chance made everything, then there's no morality. I do think that the principles behind the theory of evolution are so specifically ruinous that one ought to consider very carefully whether it should be taught, whether it's right or wrong. Because if it is true that the fittest survive, and the fittest is the one who can hit the other on the head quicker, then obviously we're going to put a premium on brutality.
Do you think if there was an alternative to the evolution theory, other than creation, because that involves God and everything else, that many scientists would seriously think over such an alternative?
Oh yes, I think that any scientist who's got his head screwed on the right way will turn to something else if he can find it. The problem is to find it. The universal opinion today is this: give us an alternative to the evolution theory and we'll take it. But we don't know of any alternative. And they don't want the alternative of creation because creation is unthinkable, is what they say. I've seen those words in print. The only alternative to this ridiculous theory of evolution is the unthinkable theory of creation. Well, if it's unthinkable, that's because you can't think, that's all.
Is there any interest in your lectures these days on evolutionism in the scientific world from students or?
Oh yes, enormous interest. When you announce a subject like this, such as I've just done in Basel, the place is standing on its head in 5 minutes. Because they're so convinced that materialism is proved that for a professor to stand up and show that it's bunk is just simply highly interesting. And when they come then and find the Christian message behind it too, they're very, very surprised indeed. But if you do it properly and in love, they're very grateful for it. We've had 1,000 present every night amongst the students in Basel 2 weeks ago. And then the same in Graz, and the same in Vienna, and the same in Innsbruck, and the same in Zurich. It's all the way around.
So you think the days may be over that Christian people are mocked at when they like to stand on the Bible?
Oh, I don't think that the days of mocking are over, because you will always find people that mock at anything of the nature of Christianity. But I do think the days are over when the Christian has to be in a ghetto, a scientific ghetto, because we have all science behind us.
Aldus professor Wilder Smith. Wanneer u de tekst van dit programma nog eens rustig wilt nalezen, dan kunt u die bij ons bestellen. We sturen u die graag kosteloos toe. Schrijft u even een briefkaartje naar Evangelische Omroep, postbus 565 in Hilversum. En schrijft u dan even in de linkerbovenhoek tekst Christenen vandaag, evolutie of schepping.